You've heard the warning before, probably several times. Don't mess with a Scorpio. It's said almost like superstition, with a crooked smile, as if it were folklore. But what if that warning were wrong? Not in direction, in depth. What if what happens when someone disrespects a Scorpio isn't anything like what you're imagining now? Because most people, when they think about Scorpio's reaction, imagine calculated coldness, planned revenge, a surgical and silent cut. And that image isn't entirely wrong, but it's the outsider's version. It's what appears. What doesn't appear is what really matters. What happens inside Scorpio at the exact moment of contempt is a process that doesn't have a popular name. It's not anger, it's not sadness, it's not resentment, at least not in the way most people understand that word. It's something more like a total recalibration, a system that restarts, a map that is being rewritten in real time. And those who disregarded it don't realize any of this. They see the silence and think it's over. They see the smile and think there were no consequences. But the consequences are happening on a level that no external radar can detect. By the end of this video, something about yourself will make sense in a way it never has before. About how you process pain, about what you do with those who didn't recognize you, and about the silent power that operates within you without you having to move a muscle. Scorpio doesn't react immediately because they don't need to react immediately. They're too busy understanding what just happened on a level most people don't even know exists. While everyone else is processing what was said, Scorpio is already processing what it revealed about the person who said it. And this is a process that has no hurry. Because Scorpio knows in an instinctive and almost irrational way that the truth always emerges. Always. It's just a matter of letting time do its work. And then comes the silence. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. The silence of someone who has already decided that certain things don't need to be said to become real. There's a word people misuse when talking about Scorpio. They say Scorpio holds grudges, that they're vengeful, that they don't forget. All of that is true, but it's a very superficial version of something much more complex. What Scorpio does isn't hold grudges. What they do is keep records. There's a huge difference between the two. Resentment is emotional. It ties you to the past. Records are strategic. They liberate you. And Scorpio operates in this second category with a naturalness that sometimes even they themselves don't understand. Imagine a seismograph. It doesn't react to an earthquake with noise, alarms, or drama. It simply records it. Every vibration, every tremor, every passing wave, silently with absurd precision. Scorpio is like that. Every slight, every petty betrayal, every carelessness with what he offered, all recorded, not to be displayed, to be understood, so that it never happens again. But this is where things start to get strange, because while this record is being made, something deeper is also moving. A silent reconstruction that no one sees from the outside. A city being redesigned from the inside while the facade looks exactly the same. And when this reconstruction ends, and it always ends, Scorpio's world is different. People have been repositioned, priorities realigned, and those who despised it often don't even realize that this has already happened. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. It doesn't talk about Scorpio in a superficial way. It's not a compilation of cliches about intensity and mystery. It goes straight to what Scorpio does on the inside, the ability to see beyond people's appearances, to process pain in a way that generates transformation, to rebuild oneself while the world continues to think everything is the same. It's a guide for those who were born with this depth and still don't know exactly what to do with it. You are now in that specific moment, still processing everything that has just been said, recognizing in yourself this pattern of registering without reacting, of feeling much more than you show. This state of recognition is the best time to act, not later, when clarity fades and routine swallows everything up again. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And here's a question for you to answer in the comments. When someone rejected you and you didn't react at the time, what did you do with what you felt? Did you hold on to it, transform it, simply let it go? Tell me. When Scorpio disappears, it's not out of anger. It disappears with purpose. And there's a difference that outsiders rarely manage to distinguish because, on the surface, the two seem the same. The silence seems the same. The distance seems the same. But inside, they are completely different processes. Anger wants to be seen. It needs an audience to fully exist. It wants the other person to notice, to suffer, to understand the magnitude of what they've done. Purpose doesn't need any of that. Purpose is internal, silent, and doesn't depend on anyone confirming or validating it. When Scorpio withdraws after a rejection, what's happening is a removal of fuel. Think of a flame, not the flame of a candle, fragile and dependent on its environment. The flame of something greater, which can be intense when fueled, but which without fuel simply ceases. It doesn't explode, it doesn't become dramatic, it stops. And the person who rejected them is left trying to rekindle a flame that has intentionally stopped feeding on it. This disappearance of Scorpio is often interpreted as defeat. The other person thinks he gave up, he yielded, he didn't have the courage to confront. And this mistaken interpretation is part of what makes the process so disturbing later, when the reality is revealed. Because what seemed like a retreat was, in fact, the beginning of something much more definitive. That flame didn't go out, it was brought in. And there's a huge difference between a flame that dies and a flame that decides to stop wasting itself on those who don't know how to appreciate the warmth it receives. The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, delves into exactly this. How Scorpio can use its natural capacity for withdrawal as a strategy for renewal, not isolation. How to transform silence into real reconstruction, with clarity about where to go after the internal process does its work. It's a book for those who feel too much and show too little. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. And when Scorpio reappears, because it always reappears, it's different. It's not the same being that entered the silence. Something has reorganized itself in a way that there's no going back. And that's what those who scorned it can never fully understand. The Scorpio that's on the other side of the disappearance isn't the same one that was available before. Before reaching that point of return, there's a process that happens in the dark and that almost no one sees. Scorpio's memory begins to work, and here I need to be precise about what that means, because memory in Scorpio is not what most people imagine. When we say that Scorpio doesn't forget, we usually mean that they hold grudges, that they ruminate on what happened like someone chewing on something they'll never be able to swallow. But that's not it. Scorpio's memory functions more like a navigation system than a file of resentments. Every painful experience, every moment they were underestimated, every broken promise, all of that becomes data, information, a map. Imagine an archivist who catalogs documents not to reread the past, but to have a precise reference to the present. He knows where every record is. He can access any of them at any time with impressive clarity, but he doesn't sit reading the files all day. He only uses this system when he needs to navigate something new. And when Scorpio encounters a situation similar to something he has already experienced, a person with a similar pattern, a family dynamic, an environment that resonates with something old, the system kicks in, not with emotion, with precision. This doesn't mean Scorpio is cold. It means they've learned to transform experience into emotional intelligence. The apparent coldness people perceive isn't an absence of feeling. It's feeling so processed, so integrated, that it no longer needs performance to exist. It's simply there, silent and functional, doing its job beneath the surface. And there's something else in this Scorpio memory worth highlighting. What they archive isn't just the faults of others. They also archive their own reactions, what they felt, what they ignored for too long, what they should have noticed sooner but didn't because they chose to believe it. This self-inventory is brutal inside. Scorpio is as precise with themselves as they are with others, which means they also clearly see where their own naivete got in the way, where their own need for connection made them close their eyes to what was right in front of them. This can be heavy. It can turn into destructive self-criticism if not managed well. But when it works right, this honest look at oneself is what differentiates Scorpio from someone who simply accumulates resentment. They don't just record what the other person did, they record what they learned about themselves in that process. And this double layer of insight about the other person and about themselves is what makes Scorpio's memory so powerful and so transformative. And here comes the moment that no one expects. The person who despised a Scorpio, who ignored them, belittled them, chose not to take them seriously, that person, unintentionally, did something that the Scorpio themselves sometimes cannot do on their own. They revealed the truth about themselves before it was too late. The contempt functioned as a test that no one consciously administered, but whose result was absolutely clear. The fire that burns the straw and leaves the gold. It's an almost cliché image, but it's the most honest way to describe what happens here. Disdain burned away what was fragile in the relationship. What remains is more solid, more real, more aligned with what Scorpio genuinely needs around them. And whoever stayed after this process, whoever passed through the involuntary filter, has a guaranteed place in a circle that is small but absolutely unshakable. The enemy, without realizing it, has become an agent of purification. Scorpio discovers not only who despised him, but who should never have been so close. And this discovery, painful as it is, has enormous value. This is the paradox that few manage to see. The enemy unintentionally helped, and Scorpio, at the center of it all, emerges with a clarity about their relationships that many people spend their entire lives without achieving. The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, directly addresses this point. How Scorpio can use involuntary losses, people who have revealed themselves, bonds that have dissolved, not as open wounds, but as an active part of building a life with more purpose and less noise. How to transform the filter into a real foundation. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. But there's a layer to this story that's almost never told. The layer of what Scorpio feels inside throughout this whole process, because there's a persistent misunderstanding about this sign. The idea that Scorpio's intensity is only outward, that what they process internally is something cold, calculated, without real emotion. Disdain hurts. It hurts deeply, in a way that doesn't show on the surface because Scorpio learned very early on that showing this pain was dangerous, that opening up about their feelings to the wrong people was the quickest way to have that very thing used against them. So the pain exists, it's real, heavy, and it stays. But Scorpio has a relationship with pain that's different from most. They don't run from it, they delve into it. Imagine an alchemist. Someone who takes lead, heavy, opaque, seemingly worthless, and works with it until it's transformed into something of real value. Scorpio does this with emotion. The pain of scorn doesn't remain stagnant in their chest like a block of ice that never melts. It is processed, refined, transformed into self-knowledge, into clarity, into a deeper understanding of what they want and what they no longer want to tolerate in life. This process has a cost. It's exhausting, it's lonely, it's invisible to outsiders. And sometimes Scorpios carry this inner work for too long, without support, without recognition, without anyone around even noticing what's happening. But when it's over, when lead has turned to gold, when pain has turned to clarity, what remains is something that no external experience can undo. A certainty about oneself that doesn't depend on validation. An identity forged in hardship, not built in ease. And here's what few realize about the cost of this process. Scorpio often does this transformative work completely alone. Not because they don't want to share. Scorpio is capable of an intimacy and depth of connection that few signs achieve. But because they've learned through experience that not everyone can keep up with the depth of what they're processing. That trying to explain this process to someone who doesn't have the same kind of internal radar often results in more misunderstanding, not less loneliness. So he goes down alone, he processes it alone, and he emerges alone with something new that didn't exist before. And then the world looks at him and says, "You're okay, you're different, you've grown." But it doesn't see the cost of what was necessary for that growth to happen. It doesn't see the nights when the weight was real. It doesn't see the effort of not letting the pain turn into bitterness, of not letting distrust turn into permanent closure, of continuing to open up carefully with discernment, even after having been hurt. This is one of the quietest and most admirable aspects of Scorpio. Not the visible strength, the strength that sustains everything beneath, that no one sees, that rarely anyone appreciates. And that's exactly when the world begins to realize what it has lost. Because whoever scorned a Scorpio didn't lose a battle. They lost access. And that's a much harder loss to understand than a conventional defeat, because it doesn't appear immediately. It seems like everything remains the same for a while. But the library closed, the books exist, the depth is still there, it's just no longer available to those who didn't know how to appreciate what was offered. What's lost isn't the physical presence. The physical presence can continue. Scorpio can be in the same room, the same company, the same group of friends. But the deepest version of him, the one who shares what he truly thinks, who gives himself with the intensity he's capable of, who offers the absolute loyalty that only he knows how to give. That version has closed for that specific person. Like a library that issued a simple, undramatic announcement, this reader no longer has access to the collection. And the question remains, can this be reversed? Can Scorpio reopen what it closed? The honest answer is rarely. Not because Scorpio is inflexible or incapable of forgiving, but because they have a very clear awareness of what a person has revealed themselves capable of doing. And that information doesn't disappear. It remains on file, precise and permanent, like all other records. The library closed. And what was lost, that depth, that unique presence, that loyalty that Scorpio offers only to those who have proven themselves worthy, doesn't return through insistence. It only returns when it returns, through genuine transformation. The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, offers a specific perspective on this. How Scorpio can recognize the value of what they have to offer and learn to consciously direct it towards those who deserve to receive it. How to transform closure into intelligent selection, not isolation. A must-read for those who want to use their depth more wisely. The link is in the first pinned comment. In the end, what remains after all this is a sculpture. A sculpture that only exists because the marble was cut, because the raw stone needed to lose parts of itself to reveal the form that had always been hidden within. The one who scorned a Scorpio was, unintentionally, one of the chisels. Not the sculptor. Scorpio is the only sculptor of their own life. But part of the cutting work was done precisely because of the pain that the scorn caused. And that's disturbing to accept, because it means that even the most painful experiences had a function. Not a just function, not a function that needed to happen the way it did, but a real function within the larger process of becoming who you are. Scorpio doesn't emerge from diminished contempt. It emerges sculpted, with sharper edges, a more definitive form, a self-awareness that didn't exist before. The wound was uncomfortable and real, but the foundation that remains is unshakable. If you're a Scorpio and recognize something in this video, if you felt that something here put words to something you carried without being able to name, know that this depth you possess is not a burden. It's exactly what the world needs most and what it least knows how to value. And you, as always, will continue to be who you are, with or without the recognition of those who didn't know how to see you.